This is Telltale's The Walking Dead, Season 1 Condensed. In this interactive story, the player's choices can shape how certain events play out, but the overall plot has a fixed course. With that in mind, I'm just going to go with the choices that feel true to the main character. Sorry if you don't agree. Without further ado, let's get started. The story begins with our main character, Lee Everett, in a police car. Lee's on the way to prison because he murdered a guy who was sleeping with his wife. The policeman driving the car runs into a zombie, or a walker, and the car is driven into a ditch. After some time, Lee wakes up from unconsciousness and finds the dead policeman who's been reanimated into a walker.
Officer? Holy s***!
Lee shoots the policeman and runs away from an oncoming horde of walkers. He climbs over a fence and gets into an abandoned house. Soon after, a little girl named Clementine reaches out to Lee through a walkie-talkie.
I'm Clementine. This is my house. Can you see me? I can see you through the window.
Clementine's babysitter, who's turned into a walker, jumps out and attacks Lee, prompting Clementine to rush over and hand Lee a hammer. Bonk, 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 I think she's dead. Clem says that she has been by herself, waiting for her parents to come back home. Not wanting her to be alone, Lee decides to stick with her. The pair go out onto the streets and meet Sean and Chet, two guys trying to skip town. Sean offers to take Lee and Clem back to his family's farm, but Clem seems a bit hesitant. But there's no time to wait. A bunch of walkers show up out of nowhere, so they all get in a truck and drive off. They arrive at the farm and we are introduced to Herschel, Sean's dad. After tending to Lee's injured leg, Herschel lets Lee and Clem sleep in the barn house for the night.
It smells like...
I'm sorry.
The next morning, we meet Kenny, his kid Doug, and his wife Katja.
Honey, Duck, this is Lee. And, what's the girl's name?
Clementine.
Sean's working on fortifying the fence around the barn, so Lee gives him a helping hand. After that's dealt with, Lee chats with Herschel for a bit, and then, all of a sudden... This idiot kid Doug turned on the tractor and ran over Sean's leg. The commotion draws the attention of a few walkers and they grab onto Sean and Doug. There's a choice whether to save Sean or Doug, but it doesn't make a difference. Doug will get saved no matter what, and Sean will get killed by the walkers. Herschel's not too happy about his son getting killed, so he kicks everyone off the farm. Lee and Clem tag along with Kenny and his family, and they head to Macon, Lee's hometown. Alas, the place is completely overrun by walkers. One walker gets his hands on Doug, but some woman saves the kid by shooting the walker. So the group takes shelter in a pharmacy store where they meet another group. There's Carly, a news reporter, Lily, some bitch, Larry, Lily's dad and a bitch, Glenn, a former pizza boy, and Doug, an IT tech. Larry assumes Doug was bitten because he's covered in blood. Katja's trying to clean up Doug to prove that he wasn't. Larry wants to throw Doug out of the store before he turns, but Lee and Kenny tell him off.
You wanna get violent, you old f***? Well, come on! You better have a plan to kill me, though, because it's me before anyone else in here!
In the middle of this quarrel, a walker comes out of the restroom and attacks Clem, but Carly's quick to shoot it. Larry throws a tantrum over Carly shooting the walker because the gunshot could have drawn unwanted attention. Then the old fart collapses due to his heart problems. So now Lee has to find some nitroglycerin pills for Larry. F Larry. If it were me, I wouldn't bother trying. Anyway, Lee and Doug take a look outside, and Lee spots a walker trapped under a pole. The walker is Lee's brother, the pharmacy manager, who most likely has the keys to the backdoor pharmacy. Lee goes back inside and looks around for a way to get behind the counter. While he's poking around, Lee and Clem bond a bit as they talk. It's revealed that the owners of the pharmacy are Lee's parents. While Lee does seem to care about his family, it's implied they had a falling out. Clem also shares a bit about her parents too.
My mom is a doctor and my dad is an engineer.
Even though they've only known each other for a day, it's clear that Clementine places a significant amount of trust in Lee. Anyway, Lee receives word that Glenn has reached a motor inn, but he's gotten stuck, so Lee and Carly head out to rescue him. They arrive at the motor inn, and Glenn pops out from an ice machine. He says that there's a girl trapped in a corner room. Glenn really wants to save her, so they get rid of the walkers in the area. Whack, whack, bam, bam. After they're dealt with, they reach the corner room. But turns out, the girl is already bitten. Womp womp.
I won't be fine. My boyfriend was bitten.
You have a boyfriend?
When?
She doesn't want to turn into a walker, so she decides to unalive herself. So much for that rescue mission. Back at the pharmacy, Carly reveals that she knows Lee killed someone for sleeping with his wife.
Folks around town know the owner's son got himself a life sentence, but I'm a reporter for WABE in Atlanta.
Carly worries that his history might be a problem later on, but she keeps this information to herself for now. Lee and Doug go outside again and find a way to distract the walkers, giving Lee the chance to check on his brother. He says a few words to his bro, after which he whacks him with an axe and takes his keys. Returning to the store, Lee opens the door to behind the counter and the alarm goes off. They get the nitroglycerin pills for Larry, but now they have the walkers to deal with. A couple walkers breach the store, grabbing onto Carly and Doug. So Lee has to make a choice, save Carly or Doug. I picked Carly, so goodbye Doug. On the way to escape the store, Larry socks Lee in the face cause Larry's a prick. But Kenny's a homie, and he helps Lee up. The group makes it to the motor inn, but Glenn decides to leave for Atlanta to look for his friends.
I just can't stay here knowing that they could be trapped in that city.
Lee notices that Clem is looking pretty downcast, and that's because her walkie-talkie broke. It was her only way to talk to her parents. Larry calls Lee over to tell him that he knows that Lee killed someone in the past. Larry makes it pretty clear that he doesn't like Lee. Well, you too, Larry, no one likes you. Anyway, the group decides to hunker down at the motor inn, hoping things will get better.
You know, guys, I think it's going to be okay.
That is some great comedic timing. 3 months have passed, and Lee is out hunting with a new guy, Mark.
Yeah, between the lack of food and Kenny and Lily fighting all the time, things are getting pretty tense back at the motor inn.
They come across 2 high school kids and a teacher, with the teacher caught in a bear trap. Having no other way, Lee chops off the teacher's leg and Mark picks him up. Hearing the noise, a couple walkers come to join the party. One of the high school kids gets chomped by the walkers cause his dumb ass doesn't know how to properly run away. So Lee, Mark, the teacher, and the other high school kid, Ben, arrive at the motor inn. Larry and Lily are pretty upset about new people joining the group, especially since they're already short on food. Lily's fed up with having to deal out rations herself, so she puts it on Lee to handle it. I chose to give food to Clem, Duck, Ben, and Kenny. Carly refuses, and Katja is already busy tending to the injured teacher. Larry and Lily, well, they can go eat shit. And Mark? Well, he's a nice guy, but he's gonna die soon. So Katja tried her best, but the teacher dies from blood loss. To everyone's surprise, the teacher reanimates into a walker. After a brief struggle, he gets shot by Carly. Kenny accuses Ben for not saying that the teacher was bitten, but Ben insists that the teacher was never bitten.
It's not the bite that does it. You come back no matter how you die.
Basically, everyone's infected already. If someone dies with their brain intact, they will reanimate as a walker. In the middle of this conversation, 2 men, Andy and Dan St. John, stop by to introduce themselves.
I'm Andy St. John. This here's my brother Dan.
The brothers ask for some gasoline in exchange for some food, which the group desperately needs. Half of the group agreed to follow the St. John brothers back to their farm to check out the situation. The St. John farm seems like a secure area. The place has an electric fence surrounding the perimeter, frying any walkers that come too close. The gasoline can help provide the energy needed to keep the fence running. The St. John brothers introduced the group to their mom, Brenda.
I'm Brenda St. John, and welcome to the St. John Dairy.
Brenda mentions that their priced dairy cow is sick, so Mark offers to bring Katja, who's a veterinarian, to treat the cow. Thankful for the help, Brenda starts preparing dinner for the whole group. Andy asks Lee and Mark to check the perimeter to see if there's any dead walkers tangled in the fence. While pushing corpses off the fence, the electricity suddenly turns on, and bandits start attacking.
What the? Get to the gate!
Lee and Mark run away and return to the St. John's, telling them about the bandit attack. The rest of the motor inn survivors have arrived at the farm, aside from Ben and Carly, who stayed behind to protect the motor inn. Because of the bandit attack, Dan and Lee decide to do some reconnaissance, venturing into the forest to locate the bandits. Along the way, they stumble upon an empty bandit camp. While looking through their stuff, Lee finds Clementine's hat. One of the bandits, Jolene, suddenly joins the scene.
I ain't going back. You tell him Jolene ain't going back.
Jolene is clearly unstable, and she starts accusing Dan for some heinous crime. Before she can elaborate, Dan shoots her.
Tell him what you got in mind for—
They return to the farm, and Lee joins Clementine, Katja, Andy, and Doug at the barn house. As Lee approaches a door at the back of the barn house, Kenny joins him, a little wary of what's being kept there.
Lee, you know how to pick a lock, right?
No. Why would you say that?
Well, you're, you know, urban?
Oh, you are not saying what I think you're saying.
Lee's urban instincts tell him to unscrew the padlock, then put it back once they're done looking around. A bell rings to signal everyone for dinner, but Lee stays behind to finish what he's doing. He gets the door open and discovers that it's a slaughterhouse. It looks pretty grisly, but it's just a slaughterhouse. That's normal for a farm, right? Dan catches Lee red-handed, annoyed that he was snooping around. So Lee heads straight to the house for dinner. As dinner is getting ready to be served, Lee excuses himself to wash his hands. He sneaks his way upstairs and finds a hidden room only to find, dun dun dun, Mark with his legs chopped off.
Don't eat dinner.
Lee rushes downstairs to stop everyone from eating the meat.
Mark is upstairs right now with no legs! Brenda, tell me he's not being eaten right now.
There's really no denying it. The St. John's confirmed that they are indeed cannibals. Everyone else is understandably grossed out.
Clementine, run!
Nobody's going anywhere.
As the St. John's hold everyone at gunpoint, Mark comes crawling down to join the party, and then Lee gets knocked out. A bit later, Lee wakes up in a meat locker, trapped with Clem, Kenny, Lily, and Larry. Larry throws another hissy fit, which eventually leads to him getting a heart attack, thank goodness. Lily tries to bring him back via CPR, but Kenny thinks it's best to destroy his brain before Larry reanimates. So, Lee has to choose either to help Lily bring back Larry, or to restrain Lily while Kenny finishes Larry off. I don't know about you guys, but the choice here is pretty obvious to me. F Larry. Once that's over with, Lee unscrews an air vent cover, thinking it could be the way out. Clem goes through the air duct and opens the door from outside. Lee and Kenny bump into Dan on the way out, but they get the upper hand and Dan steps on a bear trap. Lee can choose whether to kill Dan or not, but the guy's defenseless now, and Clem's watching, so Lee spares him. Lee enters the St. John's house where Katja's being held hostage by Brenda. So Lee tries to reason with Brenda.
Put the gun down, bitch! No!
Lee gets Brenda to slowly back up until she gets grabbed by Mark, who's a walker now, or a crawler I suppose. I don't think he can walk anymore. Back outside, Andy has Duck at gunpoint. Kenny, for some stupid reason, runs towards them and gets shot. He'll be fine, don't worry. Carly shoots Andy in the ear, giving Duck a chance to run away. Lee wrestles with Andy, with Lee eventually overpowering him. Wham wham zoot. Lee can't choose whether to finish him off or walk away. Either way, Andy's going to die. The electric fence is down, the undead are coming, Dan is stuck in a bear trap, and Brenda's a walker. The St. John's are done for. On the way back to the motor inn, the group finds a deserted car stocked with food and supplies. Lily and Clem are opposed to taking the stuff, but the rest of the group are eager to do so. We don't want to disappoint Clem, so Lee is not going to partake. Carly finds some batteries for the camcorder Lee found and sees a recording left by Jolene. Jolene has been watching Clem at the motor inn. Jolene's daughter was violated and killed by the bandit group she was with, so she became obsessed with becoming Clem's new mom.
Don't worry, little girl. Bandits got their eye on that dairy. As long as they keep getting food from them, you'll be safe.
Pretty creepy. A week passes by. Lee and Kenny are going through town to stock up on supplies. As they try to get into the pharmacy store, some woman runs out of the building while screaming, attracting a bunch of walkers.
Somebody help me! Oh God! Oh God!
What the?
Kenny suggests keeping the woman alive as bait. That's smart but inhumane, so Lee chooses to put her out of her misery. Lee and Kenny take whatever's left from the pharmacy and leave the area. Upon returning to the motor inn, Lee sees Clem talking into her walkie-talkie, which is strange because it's supposed to be broken. Lee and Kenny meet up with Lily and they discuss the group's future. Lily wants to stay at the motor inn over the long haul, but Kenny believes that they should leave before winter. An argument ensues and Lily gets heated, telling everyone to leave.
And I know the list of people I can trust here gets smaller every day. Now everybody get out!
Carly pulls Lee aside and urges him to tell the others that he's a convicted killer, suggesting it's better to confess himself before the others hear it from someone else. If Lee does agree to come clean, there's a variety of reactions. Clem doesn't say much, but she seems upset. Kenny seems to understand. Katja is a little surprised, but she's not eager for details. Ben is happy that Lee confided in him, and Lily, well, she already knew, and simply dismisses Lee. After that's all done with, Lily tells Lee that someone from inside their group has been stealing supplies. Lee asks around and looks for clues, leading to him finding a bag full of meds hidden in the outside wall. While Lee and Lily discuss how to expose the thief, a bunch of bandits burst in, taking everyone else hostage. Lee goes out to distract them, and Lily shoots one of them, giving the group a chance to fight back. The rest of the bandits start attacking, so Lee has to hold them off while the group gets into the RV. All that gunfire attracts the walkers, and one walker attacks Katja and Duck. Bam! Lee takes care of it. Once they all get into the RV, they drive off. With everyone in the RV, RV, Lily starts pointing fingers, accusing one of them for working with the bandits. She's mainly suspicious of Carly and Ben. The RV runs into a walker, so Kenny parks the vehicle and everyone steps outside. The dispute really escalates, and just as Kenny dislodges the walker, Lily shoots Carly.
Now, what the f***'s the problem? Drop it!
Now the whole group's against her, and Lee does have the choice to just leave her behind, but he decides to keep her with the group for now. Back in the RV, Lily's handcuffed and Ben has a gun pointed at her. Katja calls Lee to the front and breaks the news. Duck has been bitten. Kenny and Katja both know what this means, but they're not willing to take any immediate action. Lee tells Clem about Duck's bite, and she's not happy about it either. After a while, the RV is forced to stop due to a train blocking the way. At the train's control room, they find out that the train is still working, so Kenny takes the helm to figure out the controls. When Lee goes back to the RV to get a pencil, he finds that Lily has freed herself from her restraints. She pushes Lee out of the RV and drives off by herself. But that's fine, because they have the train in working order. It just has to get unstuck from the carts in the rear. While Lee is looking around, he meets Chuck, a homeless guy that's been living in the train carts.
Name's Chuck. Charles, if you fancy.
Chuck has already met the rest of the group, and they all seem fond of him. Once the train is all good to go, Chuck decides to tag along. As the train is speeding along, Duck's condition is getting worse, so they need to do something about it. Initially in denial, Kenny eventually agrees to stop the train. Kenny and Katja have a difficult conversation, after which they decide to end Duck before he turns. They take Duck into the forest, and it ends up being too much for Katja, so she unalives herself.
Look, Clem, things are... What the... No! Ben, take Clementine into the train.
Kenny is going through a lot right now, so Lee volunteers to shoot Duck. After that's been taken care of, the group continues their journey to Savannah. So apparently, Chuck thought it would be a good idea to tell Clementine that she's gonna end up like Duck. Kinda messed up to tell that to a kid, so Lee goes over to Chuck to give him an earful. Chuck explains that he said it out of concern. He doesn't want Clementine to be ill-prepared for survival, so he says that she should learn how to shoot and to get her haircut to avoid being grabbed so easily.
You gotta consider her a living person. That's it. You're either living or you're not. You ain't little, you ain't a girl, you ain't a boy. You ain't strong or smart. You're alive.
It's good advice, but Chuck should have just said all that to Lee straight away instead of telling Clementine she's gonna die. So Lee goes back to Clem and teaches her how to shoot, using bottles as target practice. Afterwards, he gives her a haircut, which she's not too thrilled about, but at least now she can't be grabbed by the hair so easily. As Lee walks between the carts, Ben confesses out of the blue.
I was the one giving the bandits supplies.
What?
They said they had my friend, that he was with them.
Just stop.
He has been beating himself up for it, but Lee tells him to keep it to himself for now. Lee goes back to Clem and they discuss a plan on finding her parents. Their conversation is interrupted as the train suddenly comes to a stop. There's a tanker truck hanging from a bridge and it's blocking the way.
Maybe we could walk? That's f***ing stupid, Ben.
On the bridge, there's a couple, Omid and Krista. They seem nice enough, so they become acquainted with the rest of the group.
Guys, this is Omid and Krista.
Not big on welcomes?
Lee finds a blowtorch, which is perfect for cutting off the coupling of the tanker. As Lee and Omid are taking care of that, a shitload of zombies start coming towards the group, so Kenny starts up the train.
Kenny, go!
From the bridge, Lee hops onto the train, but Omid has a not-so-smooth landing. Omid still makes it on, but his leg is injured. Lee joins Kenny and Clem at the front of the train. While Clem is dozing off, her walkie-talkie turns on, and a stranger speaks from the other end.
I got your parents right here, and you be sure to find me, whether Lee wants you to or not. Now, what I need...
So the group makes it to Savannah, and the plan is to go look for a boat at the riverfront. Lee holds on to Clem's walkie-talkie, feeling uneasy about her talking to the stranger. As they're wandering the streets, Lee spots someone on the roof, the one who rang the church bell. The stranger speaks through the radio, confirming that he's watching Lee and his group.
If I were you, I'd get out of the street now.
I thought you said that thing didn't work.
Because of the bell ringing, the walkers start closing in and they surround Clementine and Ben. Instead of helping Clem escape, Ben runs off like a little bitch. Luckily, Chuck comes to the rescue, whacking the walkers with a shovel. The group has no choice but to leave Chuck behind, and they find shelter in a house with a nice boundary wall. When they get inside the house, Kenny and Ben look around to make sure the coast is clear. Lee asks Clem who she was talking to on the radio. Clem was led to believe that the stranger is a friend trying to help find her parents. This conversation is cut short when Ben asks Lee to check up on Kenny, who's gone silent while checking the attic. So Lee goes to the attic, finding a speechless Kenny as he sees a kid who's turned into a walker. The kid reminds Kenny of Duck. As he did before with Duck, Lee takes it upon himself to finish off the kid. After he's dealt with, Lee buries the kid with his dog in the front yard. As Lee finishes up the burial, he notices someone staring at him from outside.
Hey! Hey!
Krista thinks it might be the same man on the radio. Anyway, Kenny decides it's time to check out the riverfront, so he heads out with Lee. Once they get there, they see that there aren't any boats. Well, there is one, but it can't be used. They discover a wall nearby, made up of dead bodies, with walkers impaled on spikes. After looking around a bit, the hooded figure, the one that's been ringing the bells, arrives at the scene. So Lee and Kenny try to ambush them. If the hooded figure gets the upper hand on Lee, Clem will come stop them before they can deliver the finishing blow. The hooded figure backs off and reveals her face. Kenny tries to attack her from behind and fails, falling and misfiring his gun. After the tension is cleared, the woman introduces herself as Molly, aka the coolest character in the game.
The name's Molly.
Molly, I'm Lee. This is Kenny and Clementine. Not looking for any trouble.
Hi.
Molly thought Lee and Kenny were from Crawford, a survivor community that went to extreme measures to ensure their own survival. Crawford didn't take in kids, which is how Molly figured out that Lee and Kenny weren't from there. Anyway, Molly admits that she's been ringing the bells to distract the walkers. Because of the gunfire earlier, walkers come waltzing into the riverfront. As they're escaping, Molly has no problem parkouring her way up an alleyway. Molly is about to leave the others behind, but Clementine gives her the puppy eyes. There's really no resisting that, so Molly helps them up. Lee doesn't make it up, so he goes down a manhole and escapes into the sewers. While going through the sewers, Lee finds out what happened to Chuck.
Oh my god. Chuck, he must have tried to hide out down here. Poor bastard.
After wandering around for a bit, Lee eventually finds a morgue inside a fallout shelter, stumbling upon a group of people. Vernon, the leader of the group, has a gun pointed at Lee, worried that he might be from Crawford. After Lee assures him that he's not a threat, Vernon introduces his crew as the Cancer Support Group. They used to be a part of Crawford, but they were weeded out.
We're in remission. But that wasn't good enough for Crawford.
Vernon very kindly offers to guide Lee back to his group at the house. When they get back to the house, Vernon checks out Omid's injured leg. Meanwhile, Molly's snooping around the house, and Ben's just chilling with Kenny, who's getting tipsy. Lee finds Clementine outside, who was busy poking around the shed, and oh look, she found a boat. Kenny is happy about that. After Vernon did his best cleaning out Omid's leg wound, the group gathers in the house. Kenny says that the boat needs a new battery and some gas. Crawford's the only place that could have a car battery and gas, so that's where they are going. Clem overhears this conversation and she wants to tag along. We're not leaving Clem alone, so yeah, she's coming. Before heading for Crawford, Kenny shares some bad news to Lee. The boat can only hold 5 people. There's 7 people: Lee, Kenny, Clem, Krista, Omid, Ben, and Molly. Some people will have to be left behind. Vernon returns with Bree, another woman from the Cancer Support Group. Bree knows Crawford's layout well, so she will be useful. Upon reaching Crawford, the group finds out pretty quickly that the place has been overrun by walkers. They take shelter in a school building and decide to split up. Lee and Molly will look for the battery, Kenny and Bree go for the gas, Krista and Vernon will find a way into the nurse's station for meds. Clem and Ben stay in the classroom.
I'm not leaving you with Ben. I'm leaving him with you. Understand?
Oh, okay.
As Lee looks for a way to the maintenance shed, Molly is off doing her own thing. Molly shows up later, tossing a walker off a roof and giving it a good beating.
Some kind of scientist or doctor, maybe?
Yeah, well, he ain't shit now.
Lee and Molly get their hands on a car battery and make it back to the school building. But Molly holds on to the car battery and goes off to handle some unfinished business. A couple walkers are about to bust into the building, so Lee braces the door with an axe. Kenny and Bree return with some gas, so Kenny goes back into the classroom and tries to unlock the door to the armory. Meanwhile, Ben confides in Lee, feeling guilty for indirectly getting Katja and Doug killed. He tells Lee that he wants to tell the truth to Kenny, but now is really not a good time. Lee joins Vernon and Krista at the nursing station. Seems like they're having trouble unlocking the safe with all the medicine in it. Lee finds a tape and plays it. It's footage of a doctor and a woman discussing her pregnancy. The woman's baby has to be terminated as per Crawford protocol, but she doesn't want to go through with it. The doctor was the walker that Molly was beating up earlier. Lee figures that the doctor has the safe combo, so he heads over, gives the dog a good stomp, and takes his tape and a piece of paper with a code on it. Lee finds the doctor's locker and finds another tape. He returns to the nurse's station and watches the second tape of Krista and Vernon. The footage shows the woman stabbing the doctor and then taking off. Krista has an emotional reaction after watching the tape. It's never outright stated, but it's heavily implied that Krista is pregnant. But anyway, now they know the safe combo. After taking the meds, Krista and Vernon leave the room. Lee found a third tape, so he takes a look. The footage suggests that the doctor and Molly finished up some intimate business. The doctor was discreetly providing meds for Molly's sister, but he ended this arrangement to avoid getting caught. As Lee heads back to join the others, Molly pops in from the roof, so Lee confronts her about the footage. Molly eventually concedes after being pressed on. She used to live in Crawford with her diabetic sister. The higher-ups took away Molly's sister after finding out about her condition. And that's why Molly went off on her own. She wanted to find the picture of her sister. Anyway, Ben shows up holding an axe. Yes, the same axe that was barring the door. Damn it, Ben. Walkers come barging in, and one gets a hold of Molly. Good thing Clem came along though, cause she shoots the walker, saving Molly. Everyone's back in the classroom, with the walkers clawing at the door. Ben thinks it's a great time to fess up about his involvement with the bandits back at the motor inn.
What are you saying? It was me who made the deal with the bandits at the motor inn, slipping them supplies. I thought maybe I could keep them off our backs. When it got discovered, that's when they attacked. And that's when Duck...
In response, Kenny goes ballistic on Ben, voting to leave him behind. Krista is in favor, but Clementine stands up for Ben, leading to Krista abstaining from her votes. Lee also chooses to keep Ben with the group.
What about the rest of us? Don't we get a say?
That's right, shut the hell up, Ray, you're not part of the team. As the walkers come pouring in, the group get into the bell tower and make their way to the top. The bell starts ringing, and the walker that's hanging on the bell grabs Ben. Lee shoots the walker, and Ben almost falls down. Barely hanging on, Ben tells Lee to let go, feeling like he doesn't deserve to live. But no, that would make Clem sad, and his character development isn't complete. So Lee pulls him up, and they all return to the house. Now that they have the medicine, Vernon can properly tend to Omid. After taking care of Omid, Vernon takes Lee aside and offers to take Clem under his wing, feeling like Lee's group isn't safe for her. Well no, screw that, Vernon can piss off. After that discussion, Lee catches Molly trying to quietly slip away. Molly says that she's better off alone, but she probably thought that the group might have had to ditch her anyhow. And so Lee bids Molly farewell with a hug. As she heads off, she tells Lee to take good care of Clem.
Good luck.
Ain't nothing to do with luck.
And just like that, she is gone. Nowhere to be seen in season 2, 3, or 4. What a waste of a good character. Lee goes to have a chat with Clem, who's keen on finding her parents. He has to tell her that they might not be able to, so she ends up crying herself to sleep. Lee takes a nap and wakes up to find Clementine missing. Lee ventures outside and finds her hat along with her walkie-talkie. He gets down to grab it, then blam! Lee gets bit.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
Lee? Lee? You out here?
There is no point in hiding it, so Lee shows the whole group. Lee tells everyone that Clem has gone missing. The assumption is that Vernon and his crew have taken her. Lee needs help getting her back. Omid and Krista decide to join in. Lee has been a homie to Kenny since day one, so Kenny's in too. And Ben, well, he owes it to Clem, so he's tagging along also. Upon reaching the morgue, they see that Vernon and his crew have already skedaddled. Clementine calls out for Lee from the radio, then the stranger chimes in shortly after.
Clementine's fine, but if I were you, I'd choose my next words very carefully.
The stranger cryptically says that he did not kidnap Clem, he rescued her. Now the group needs to find a way out of the morgue. As Lee uses a rib spreader to force open the elevator doors, he passes out. He wakes up on a table while the group is deciding whether or not to cut off his arm.
This is about trying to save him. At the very least, buy him some time.
Do we have to cut it off though?
To be frank, cutting it off is not going to help. Lee decides to keep his arm. The group climbs up an elevator shaft and they make it to the top of the hospital building. Faced with thousands of walkers swarming the streets, Lee makes his way to the bell tower to ring the bell and distract them. Getting back to the house, they discover that Vernon's crew stole their boat, but at least they had the decency to leave a note to explain themselves. Kenny blows up again because of the dire situation, directing most of his anger towards Ben. But this time, Ben finally snaps.
So Lee should have left your ass in Crawford. We got enough problems. F*** you, Kenny!
I am so so sorry about Katja and Duck. You know how they died. You've said goodbye. I never got to see my family, my parents, my little sister. Do you get that? Family is gone, but at least you had them to lose. They could be alive or dead or walkers or worse, and I don't know. So give me a fucking break.
Kenny actually begins to apologize, but the walkers start coming in, so the group gets ready to defend themselves. After wasting all their ammo on the walkers, everyone goes up into the attic. So Lee has another brief blackout, leading Kenny to start thinking about killing Lee before he turns. Kenny's lack of empathy towards Lee's situation causes an argument between them, leading to Lee throwing a bust against the wall in frustration. As luck would have it, turns out the attic wall is corroded, so they take turns smashing the wall to make an opening. Once they breach the wall, they enter another house where they see a couple in bed that have unalived themselves. Kenny expresses his disapproval, venting about his frustration over his family's demise. The group takes turns jumping from the fire escape onto another roof. Ben's the last one, and the fire escape decides it doesn't like Ben, so it breaks under his weight. Ben falls down the alley, so Lee and Kenny go to check on him. But he's been impaled through the stomach. He's not gonna make it.
We can get you up. We can,
Ow! Oh, oh.
As the walkers come closing in, Kenny forces Lee to leave as he fights off the walkers. Kenny then puts Ben out of his misery and is allegedly killed. Now it's just Lee, Omid, and Krista. As they approach Marsh House, the hotel that Clem might be in, Lee volunteers to go across a metal beam to get to another roof. The metal beam breaks under pressure, separating Lee from Omid and Krista. Now that he's alone on the streets with nothing much to lose, Lee goes on a killing spree.
Rip and tear until it is done.
Arriving at Marsh House, Lee enters a room and sees a bedroom door and closet door roped together. And then the stranger greets Lee with a gun pointed at him.
Hello.
Okay. This is civil.
Lee and the stranger sit down to chat. The stranger reveals that he was the owner of a car, one full of food and supplies, the one Lee's group stole from. The stranger explains that he, his wife, and his daughter left the car to look for his son who went missing. They couldn't find him, and when they returned to the car, all their stuff was taken. Blaming the stranger for everything, his wife took their daughter and left, only for him to find them dead the next day. After story time is over with, the stranger starts pointing out all of Lee's mistakes, though it just seems like a desperate attempt to make Lee look like the bad guy.
How could you know all this?
The stranger believes he can be a better caretaker for Clementine, but no, that's a hard pass. The dude is completely bonkers. While the stranger is talking to something in his bag, Clem sneaks out and sucker punches him.
She wouldn't hurt a fly.
Lee is given a chance to attack, and after a struggle, he chokes the stranger until he's either dead or just knocked out. Now Lee and Clem are back together, yay! Taking a look in the bag, we see that the stranger was talking to the decapitated head of his wife. What a weirdo. Lee opens up the door and there's a walker standing before him, but the walker completely ignores him, aiming to get Clem instead. After dealing with the walker, Lee cuts it open and covers Clem in its guts, figuring it would act as camouflage against the walkers. As Lee and Clem step out to face the walker horde, the walkers completely ignore them. After going through most of the crowd, Clem finally finds her parents, just not in the way she was hoping for. And then Lee passes out again. Lee wakes up, practically knocking at Dev's door. Clem somehow dragged the man into a secure building. Lee reveals to Clem that he's been bitten, and she's understandably not that happy about it. Lee's stamina bar is depleted, and it ain't recharging, so he slumps down. Clem gets into a room where there's an undead policeman stuck in a chair. She grabs some handcuffs, and Lee tells her to handcuff him to a radiator, since he might turn soon. And uh-oh, the undead policeman breaks free and grabs Clem. A well-placed pedestal falls onto the walker, allowing Clem to pummel the walker with a baseball bat. Clem's a certified badass now. Lee is almost out of time. He shares some heartfelt words for Clem and urges her to go look for Omid and Krista. Before parting ways, there's one last thing Clementine has to do. Clem does end up finding Omid and Krista, good for her. So that's it. That was Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1 Condensed. Thanks for watching.